I got into astral projecting. I got into, dream journaling, and just a bunch of stuff I shouldn't have been doing. It started off with me trying to go to sleep and dream consciously. I would lay on my back still. I couldn't move much or it wouldn't work. And I would enter a state of sleep paralysis. Now this opened a pretty big door in my life because this is what led to me having a lot of episodes later on. Sleep paralysis would kick in and I would have to block everything out in order to get into the dream that I wanted to be in. So I would kind of try and envision it in my head, and I would move small parts of my body to get a sensation of where I wanted to be. It didn't always work, and that's where I had a lot of sleep paralysis episodes. There was one time where I felt something hug around me. It whispered something into my ear, and it wasn't English, it was like demonic tongues. My name is Brandon. I'm 18 years old from the Bronx, and this is my testimony. So growing up, I didn't really grow up much around religion or any beliefs. My family was primarily Christian, but their faiths weren't showing and they weren't really, loud on it. It was very secret and very underlying. So they weren't vocal about it. I wasn't told to pray. I wasn't brought to church. I wasn't, in the Word. I didn't even know the Bible really existed at first. I didn't really know how to even, learn about God. There was a church across from me that was right down the block, but I never went there. I only saw them outside. I would see them preaching. I caught very few words from them. My life before Christ was pretty rough growing up. I grew up with my mother. I grew up with my stepfather, and I grew up with his two brothers. To give a little context before that, just I guess kind of set the tone for, how do I say it? What I even went through before, I was given birth to. My father was a drug dealer in Texas, and my mom was living with him at the time in a trailer. This guy was pretty mentally unwell, so he attempted to kill me while I was in her womb. He put a gun to her stomach, and thankfully he didn't pull the trigger. Shortly after that, my family found out that I was, gonna be birthed to. My mom didn't know at first, and they were all kind of considering abortion, but it was a bit too late. So I went through my second trial before, I was fully given birth to. And, as I was about to be delivered on my mother, my umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck. So there was a chance that I could have died from lack of oxygen. And then I finally got out, Brandon was here. Fast forward to my young age, around 4 years old, I vividly remember, growing up with my father, my stepfather, my mother, my stepfather's two brothers, and it was a pretty unique environment. It was dirty. I definitely do recall it being dirty. There was a lot of roaches in the drawers, and then the walls, the cabinets. There was rats, but it was kind of normal to me. My mother spoiled me a lot. She would buy me toys, games. I pretty much just only played on the PlayStation that was in my room, and that's it. That's pretty much it. I would go to school. I would not do my work. I would, not pay attention. I would come home. I would eat something, get in a game. She would probably argue with my stepfather. I would, kind of push them out and just pay attention to the TV and what I was doing. And that's pretty much it, yeah. My interactions with my uncles are very few. One of the interactions that do stand out is me being given alcohol at a young age. I took a sip of beer. It wasn't really much. It was just kind of the only thing I can even recall from them, to be honest. So going from then into middle school, 7 years old, my mother had Alzheimer's, and it had gotten worse, and my family started to recognize it. At first, they didn't really know about it because it was a little, it wasn't as bad, but it got worse when she had me, and the signs became much more apparent. So my family didn't want me to go to the foster care system, so my aunt vouchered to take me in, and she did. I moved down the block to Walton Avenue, and I lived there in an apartment. I had 3 cousins, and I had, one aunt. Growing up with them was also rough. I had a better environment in terms of the sanitary conditions in my home. I was fed much more. I was given better clothes. A lot of my clothes in my old house were dirty and they weren't even really washed. But despite me having that, they did not treat me well. It went hand in hand with me lying a lot to them. I didn't like the idea of punishment, so naturally I would lie, and I would hope that they would fall for it. But they would usually catch on. And at first it was just a simple, correction, and then it moved into them hitting me, beatings. I wasn't doing good in school as well during elementary, and they would make remarks to me, call me names. They would, downplay my intelligence, my worth, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, my relationship with my cousins were shaky. I did look up to them, and I did see them as older brothers in a sense. I thought, the physicality was kind of just a normal thing. I didn't really think much of it. But I wasn't given much opportunity to develop my relationship with them. So I would be in the room with them, but they usually just go to my older cousin's room, and they would smoke. They would probably play the game in the room where I was in, because that's where my other cousin's system was. And that's pretty much it. For middle school, that's where things got worse. I was in a different environment at the time, so I got open to a lot more things. I got open to porn. Porn began to be a big stronghold in my life, and it warped my perception of girls from a young age. I was a little more pure at this time, so my interactions with them would still just be off of, childish ambition, just simply trying to make friends, just trying to mix in with the crowd. But due to my personality, I had a lot of friction with the classmates. I was a goofball, so if I wasn't making them laugh, then I wasn't really doing much. They would make fun of me for what I would wear. I would have baggy clothes. My acne was super bad at the time. I had like a lot of pimples, so they would make fun of me. They would ridicule me. That's pretty much it. In middle school, I got into a lot of fights as a way to, keep my status somewhat relevant. If I wasn't joking around a lot. So our first high school year was during COVID. I attended John F. Kennedy, I believe that was the name of the high school, online, virtually. I was given a physical option, but my arm wasn't down with it, so I did virtual. This was around the time where I was mostly isolated, so I didn't have the chance to joke around. I didn't see my friends. I was just in my crib, got on the computer, did my schoolwork. Well, not really did my schoolwork. I attended the class, but I would just be doing whatever else. And that's pretty much it. It was a mundane schedule. I did get back in contact with one of my sisters. My youngest sister, she took me for a bit of the summer that came afterwards, COVID, and I was supposed to move in with her, but unfortunately that didn't happen. She ended up leaving up to VA. So I went back with my aunt, and I continued school there online. I was in junior ROTC, so I was planning on going to the Army for my career. That's pretty much it. Unfortunately, my consumption of porn got much more stronger during this time. I didn't have much to do. I wasn't able to play sports. I wasn't able to communicate with anybody else. I didn't talk to my family much, so it was really just, a lot of unhealthy habits. And my mom had passed around this time, so I was 13, about to turn 14. I remember my aunt being in the kitchen, and she was talking to my two cousins, and I overheard a discussion about my mother. Up until this point, I hadn't really seen her much. I would see her at the nursing home. I would see her progressively get worse. So, at first, she was struggling with her words, and then she couldn't really make full sentences. Then she couldn't really move much on her own, and you saw the gray hair start to kick in a lot. And she was just really suffering, and it hurt me a lot. It was a huge mental toll. The last time I had seen her, I think I had to feed her. Like, I had to break a piece of what I was feeding her, and I had to, give it to her because she didn't have the strength to even be able to eat herself. So the next day, after I overheard the conversation, I received news that my mother had passed away. I was about to turn 14. She was probably, I think she was already like in her early 50s at this time. It didn't really settle in for me at first. I kind of just blanked out of it. I didn't see any points in focusing on it much. I just wanted to stay in my own bubble. The next day, a lot of my family had come in, so the topic was there. I couldn't escape it. It was face to face. My family was trying to consult me on it, and my other aunt, my aunt's sister, Tita de Maris, she she got real close to me, and she hugged me, and yeah, I broke down. I couldn't really hold it in anymore. Uh, I was supposed to move in with my other sister from Staten Island. That was the plan. Originally, my aunt had been fed up with me, my shenanigans throughout middle school and, doing bad in my grades. She wanted me out of there. Um, my arguments got worse in my family. My cousins would get mad at me. I would start to talk back. Eventually, my aunt ended up punching me in the face. Right here, I had a black eye. And I went in with my sister in Staten Island. So I stayed with her for a good bit until the funeral. My older niece was there, and my newly born nephew. So I was pretty much chilling. I was just, doing what I did, listening to music, scrolled on Instagram. I was doing pretty much basic stuff, trying to escape the reality of my mother's passing. And we go to the funeral, and a lot of my family's there. A lot of family I didn't see much growing up. My uncles, my cousins, and it's due to responsibilities. Things happen in life. You gotta look after your part of the family. So I didn't really understand that when I was younger, and I was more so mad at the fact that it took my mother's death for them to all come together in agreement and put their differences aside, and any dirt that they did to each other in the past to like a situation of that gravity. It struck me hard, and seeing certain family members I had respect for, seeing them at such a vulnerable state. This is like just my first taste of reality, that things can be taken pretty quick, and that humans are pretty fragile. I remember looking up to the sky and thinking to myself that God didn't exist, and I didn't want anything to do with him. I didn't see any point of believing God. There wasn't really any value out of it. My mother had just been taken, so due to my mental state, I didn't want anything to do with it. Afterwards, the funeral, my oldest sister comes in, Alicia, and her and my other sister talk, and they conversate, and the plans now switch from my youngest sister to my middle sister to my oldest sister, that I'm gonna move her with her now. So they discussed it. She asked me if I wanted to move with her, and I was fine with it as long as I got away from my aunt. And I was just pretty happy to get out of there. They moved me. I moved into a different part of the Bronx near Hunts Point, and I was with my niece and my nephew. My niece was a year younger than me, and my nephew was like about 3-4 years younger than me at the time. I was 14. I just turned 14, and I pretty much I was pretty much chilling over there. I didn't really have any restrictions. I could eat whatever I want. I could go to sleep at pretty much any time I want, as long as I wasn't making too much noise. I was just bonding with my family at the time. So my porn addiction got worse. I was doing it a lot throughout the day. It became an habitual thing. Specific time. It was pretty much like my drug at the moment, and it messed with my image of woman much more. This is like kind of where it was like at the middle. It wasn't at its lowest, nor was it at its highest. It was at a specific state. And I was talking to this girl when I first got into my high school, and she wanted to sleep with me. I remember waking up the day I was supposed to meet up with her, and the Wi-Fi went out of my crib, and it was just super confusing at the time. I didn't understand anything at all. I was like, this usually doesn't happen. Like, I'm supposed to meet up with her, I'm supposed to text her, so I couldn't text her because I didn't have service outside. So I ended up going to school. She gave me a look. She was like, oh, why didn't you pull up? And I kind of just said like, oh, I was tired. Like, I just made an excuse. Looking back on it, I can definitely see God was trying to protect me. But at the moment, I didn't understand. So I just kind of went separate ways with her. I didn't really talk to her much afterwards. I didn't see the point. Moving into 10th grade. 10th grade is when I had turned 15, and I was granted the privilege of smoking. So, it was very easily accessible. It's not like I had to smoke outside. It's not like I had to cop weed. It was always in my crib. My sister's friend, he had weed at his crib. I would show of him. I would show of his sons, and we would smoke. And without the knowledge of God, it was pretty much just fun. It was fun in my eyes. Smoking, just chilling, listening to music, bonding over certain topics. And it didn't really have much of an effect on me at first, more so up until later it did. Smoking led me to a very lazy state. I still wasn't applying myself to school. I did the bare minimum to pass. It wasn't that I was too dumb or anything, or I lacked a certain level of knowledge. It's just that I didn't apply that knowledge. So the teachers would, realize this, and they would have conversations with me on the side. You're a smart young man. It's just that you don't apply yourself enough. And I didn't really care. I just really wanted to wait till the weekends when I didn't have any school and I could just smoke. I was presented with the opportunity to work at my school at a work study. So there's a program, and you get paid $200 like every 2 weeks. So instead of saving my money, I would just buy weed. I would go to my boy's crib. We would smoke. I'll get something to eat for us. That was pretty much what my routine was like. That's pretty much it. I didn't have much friends. I just had I call him my god uncle. My god uncle's sons, and that's all it really was. My journey into spiritualism was a little bit before, when I was around 13 to 14. The rapper XXXTentacion was pretty popular around this time, so his influence was pretty big. His beliefs were pretty rapidly spreading. He had talked about manifesting and dream journaling and envisioning certain things. I dove deeper into it out of interest, and I got into astral projecting. I got into dream journaling, and just a bunch of stuff I shouldn't have been doing. How do I say it? It started off with me trying to go to sleep and dream consciously. So what the routine would look like is I would try to go to sleep. I would lay on my back still. I couldn't move much, or it wouldn't work. And I would enter a state of sleep paralysis. Now this opened a pretty big door in my life, because this is what led to me having a lot of episodes later on. Sleep paralysis would kick in, and I would have to block everything out in order to get into the dream that I wanted to be in. So I would kind of try and envision it in my head, and I would move small parts of my body to get a sensation of where I wanted to be. So if it was a grainy area, I would imagine sand or dirt, or if it was a windy area, I would imagine a lot of wind blowing. It didn't always work, and that's where I had a lot of sleep paralysis episodes. So the experience would range from a lot of things. It would go from maybe me seeing a figure in the corner of my eye if I opened my eyes. There was one time where I felt something hug around me. It felt pretty bony, and it whispered something into my ear, and it wasn't English. It was like demonic tongues. And that's pretty much it. The astral projection thing I only did once. It didn't last long, and I kind of just pushed away from it. There was something unsettling about it, and I just dropped it. When I astral projected, I woke up standing up. Originally, I was on my bed, and when I woke up, I was standing next to my cousin's bed, and I woke him up and I asked him if he saw me moving, but he said he was asleep and he didn't see anything, and he thought I was just tripping. So I just went back to sleep, and I just ignored it. So what got me into church in the first place was my first girlfriend's father. He had preached to me about Jesus. He didn't really go into detail. He didn't tell me much. He just said that he was a firm believer. And I didn't take any offense to it. I thought it was a good thing. I was looking for a religion to have some type of structure. I believed a man without religion was kind of fleeting. Before, I was studying philosophy, and I studied some of Friedrich Nietzsche and Arthur Schopenhauer and a little bit of Plato, and their ideas were good, but they didn't specifically align with what I desired. I desired a higher power to give me some type of purpose. So I decided to go to church with him, and I met the people there, and they prayed over me, and I gave my life to him at 15. I didn't really understand the weight of the decision I had made. I didn't fully grasp the concept of I had to die to myself in order to live for him, right? So I didn't have much of foundation. My foundation was basically non-existent. I would read the roll whenever I wanted to, and whenever, calamity came, I just turned away from it. So going to school, my beliefs were challenged a lot, more so with the temptation. Girls trying to flirt with me and sleep with me. My habit of smoking, the secular music I was listening to, going deeper into philosophy and these ideas challenging my belief. But for some reason, I never gave it up. I remember one time I was smoking at my OG's crib, and there was a Muslim there. His name is Sharad. And he was trying to convert me, but something it just wasn't letting me. And I believe, to this day, that was God protecting me. But yeah, I couldn't do it. I felt like once I made this decision, there was just no going back. Now, moving forward, I tried to get my girlfriend at the time to come back into the faith. I didn't grow up in church, she did, but she had a lot of negative experiences growing up while in church. So it seemed like she was more so trying out religion and less relationship with God. So I would try and convince her with it. I would try and bring her back in, and she was slowly budging. Along the way of this time, a fellow named Jason, I met him, and he was also a believer. So I talked to him. We would do Bible studies together. I was getting more into the Word, and we were pretty much sharpening each other. We didn't know all, we didn't know a lot, but we gave each other what we had. The information and bits that we had, we would exchange it, and we would pray with each other. And because of my lack of foundation, I wasn't faithful. Services, I went to them, but I went to them out of a feel-good feeling, knowing that, all right, there's this higher power that's looking over me, but that's pretty much it. I saw God as an exchange card, like a debit card. I can get what I want. I had some type of protection, and that's pretty much it. It was more so just a hobby more than a lifestyle. And I kind of had a rude awakening where I got very sick at some point in my life. I had eczema, and it started off small, and then I had a skin infection, which kind of flared it up a lot. And I would have nights in my bed where I would wake up and I was bleeding onto the sheets, and I had pus leaking out of the wounds. It was a pretty dark time in my life. I couldn't see my girl at all. I was isolated for a good 2 months. I couldn't be in the sun for that long. I was pretty much home all day if I wasn't going to the doctor. And this brought me to a pretty key point of finding humility. I read the book of Job, and I had come to an understanding that I'm going to face trials while on this walk. Now, my previous experience with losing my mother had resurfaced, and I know how to kind of face that. I focused on a lot of topics in my past, but my mother was a very big one. And it was pretty hard to understand and come to terms with why I went through certain things. With my mother, I had understood that, we're humans. We have a set amount of days that we're going to be on this earth, and all that's really important is if, we do with what God's assigned us to. And I also understood that sin played a big role. The same reason I had this, the skin disease is the same reason my mother got Alzheimer's. It's just, a lot of spiritual things as to why that happens, generational curses. And, if anything, I had to understand that I should be a little bit more grateful of the fact that she did pass away, because I don't think if she did, I wouldn't even have had my faith. I wouldn't. So to get where I was now, I had to break up with my girlfriend, and I had to leave her for good. Thankfully, before we broke up the last time, which was the third time, her father brought me to Harvest. It's a church in Westchester Square, East Tremont, and it's a good community over there. There was a bigger demographic of people of my age, so I was looking forward to that in the fellowship. And the other church I went to was mostly just older folks, so I didn't really have a lot of relation to them. They had wisdom, but there wasn't really no fellowship. So after the final time of breaking up, I'm in the church, and I'm going there. I'm going to the services. I would go, and I would pretty much leave. Eventually, I talked to a couple of people there, and I would try to look for a spot of being in a certain group. I would look for the same bonds I had in the world, friends, people I could hang out with in the body of Christ, and it wasn't really working. Usually, if I asked people to hang out, it would slip their minds. They were busy, and because of my ex's pops, we had some tension. I wasn't invited to certain areas because they were worried that something would pop off. So I was very isolated, and instead of putting my motivation and my focus on God, I allowed myself to idolize fellowship, and I was focusing more on, just the people. This kind of messed with me a lot because it just made me want to go back into the world. I was like, well, all right, if I don't have the bonds over here, then I could just go back to where I'm familiar with, and I would be accepted over there. So I went back to smoking. I went back to chilling with my OGs. I went back to talking to girls. And it took a lot of stuff for me to mature to the point where I understood, okay, none of this is going to work. I shouldn't be focusing on them. I should be focusing on God. So there was after like a year, I went to Harvest, I think at 16. So after a year, around 17, I had gone closer with one of the deacons. His name is Joseph. And Joseph was kind of mentoring me at first. He took me under his wing. He would talk to me. He would give me spiritual nuggets here and there. And as I continued to go to the service, and as I continued to put my more in, instead of half doing it, sometimes I would leave in the middle of services in the past. I really, started to put more work in. And God eventually brought a brother that I met like a couple of times. We didn't talk much. His name is Tori. He came to Harvest, and he brought a brother. He brought a brother with him along as well. His name is Dwayne. But to backtrack a little bit, I'm kind of getting a little too further. Before that, I had met another mentor after I met Joseph. My mentor is in Mount Vernon. His name is Rich, and I met him through my brother Issa. Issa, I got into the faith. I evangelized him once. We didn't talk much. It was a very long period of time where we didn't hang out because he was busy and I was busy. We was going through our stuff, and he hit me up one day. He was like, "Yo, there's this dude I want you to meet." The teacher that I went to school with, I didn't know he was Christian, but I talked to him about my faith one time. It turns out he is, and he would like to meet you. I mentioned you one time. You should pull up. So I went with him. We went to the house, and it was a tall, older, dark-skinned fella. He looked like a calculus teacher. He had the glasses, the slouch posture, and I was correct. He is a teacher. So he brought me into the room, and he asked me about my past a little bit, and I told him. He asked about my faith. Why do I follow God? And he had a ministry in Boston back like in 19 something. It was pretty much where he, despite growing up in the suburbs, God called him to go to the projects in the hood to make disciples. And he saw my background, and my background pretty much aligned with these dudes from the past, and he saw something in me. He saw that I had a calling on my life, and he felt led to begin to mentor me. Now, my lack of a father figure was kind of filled. He fulfilled that role. He corrected me when I needed to be corrected, not out of harshness, but a gentle correction. He spent time with me. When I had issues, I could come to him, and he would give me solutions. If he didn't have a solution, usually, but like every time we did pray, but we would pray about it. Get into the word. He allowed me to spend nights there where I didn't want to be in my house. And the same thing for my brother. We was usually always side by side during these sessions. So I got closer with my friend. Now he's like my spiritual brother. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now back to Tori and Dwayne. My foundation had been a little bit stronger at this point due to going to church with my mentor, him feeding me and whatnot, and Joseph too. He also was doing the same as well. Tori and Dwayne were kind of just there at first. I chilled with them a couple of times. I chilled with Tori more than I did Dwayne. In all honesty, I thought my homie Dwayne was gonna leave after like the first service. I don't know why. I had it was just a weird thought, and I was wrong. He ended up coming. He was the only person out of the whole group that Tori brung that actually stayed and continues to come on his own. Dwayne's 26, Tori's 22, and I'm 18. So it's a pretty big age gap, but it's not big enough to where we can't relate. They had pretty similar backgrounds to me. Their mothers, passing away. They weren't really around their family much. They were in the streets, and it gave me comfort to know that there was people with the same background, and I finally had somebody I could chill with. Somebody I could be real with. And, the same fellowship I saw other people having, I finally had it now. So, yeah, I spent a lot of time with them, especially Dwayne. Me and Dwayne went through a lot together. There was a period in my life where I was going to college, but I wasn't attending. I would just skip, and so I wouldn't go home because I didn't want to get yelled at. So I would be outside like literally sun up to sundown, and I would go with Dwayne to the park. He would look out for me on food. We would talk. We would just talk about our lives, about God. We would pray with each other. We would get into the Word. And yeah, and the church also looked out for me. Joseph would let me into the church, and I would be allowed to be there because it was cold outside. It was like during the winter, so it was super cold. He would also give me money for me to eat and stuff. And yeah, I finally had that support system. So my walk, I had a different circle around this time. I still had my worldly friends, but I was spending more time with my my brothers in Christ. So I didn't understand what my calling was. At first, I kind of wanted to do rap. I was doing it a bit. I used to listen to J. Cole and Kendrick a lot. So I was really big into rap, but I felt like it wasn't really there. I felt like it wasn't really clicking. I feel like we already had enough Christian artists, so I kind of wanted to go to a different direction. And I noticed that I had a very big desire to sit down and talk to people. People's stories were interesting to me. They were very, very interesting. Their culture, their background, how they grew up. Even if it was completely opposite of what I experienced, it gave me a different perspective on life. So with this and multiple other people telling me that I'm very good with my words and I'm well conducted and that, I know how to express myself, and, I had a humility to receive what people said and not throw it back at their face, but instead, if they had an issue, I would try and help them with it. A lot of people also came to me advice back in the world as well. So it led me to a spot of wanting to do ministry. At first, I wanted to be a pastor. And I'm still trying to figure that out. But right now, I definitely do want to do ministry. My two mentors, Joseph and Rich, they both had and have ministries. Joseph's the head director of the men's group, and Rich had his ministry in Boston. So, and it was also prayed over me a while back that I would have one too, and I had a recent confirmation as well. I'm looking forward to it. It gives me a spot in my community. And, in my community, there's a lot of violence. There's a lot of promiscuity, a lot of, worldly things. And I can act as a pillar of light for God to use, and to use me to, help the people and bring his lost sheep back. So how God speaks to me and how I speak to God. God primarily speaks to me through other people. It's usually during prayer. I've received I've received a good amount of questions or encouragement through prayer, and especially through his word. When I had my biggest storms, whenever I would go into the word, there would always be something that almost directly relates to my situation or shows God's character and how he acts through a situation that I was facing. So for example, when I was sick, I forgot the Psalms, but there was a Psalms that basically it talks about how God is, your protector during harsh times, and how he'll lay you down in green pastures. There was, also the book of Job, which helped me a lot. And yeah, he usually speaks to me through his word and dreams sometimes too. I still have vivid dreams, and sometimes they're random. And sometimes they're just dreams I shouldn't interpret, and then sometimes there's some type of spiritual meaning behind it. So with the porn addiction, I did keep falling. In all honesty, I basically had this issue of relying on my own strength. So, the thought would come, or even just the thought of fornicating, because I also was messing with a couple of women at the time, unfortunately, where I would just shrug it off. So like, all right, I'm not gonna do that. And I was stupid because, you're not supposed to really, how do I say it? Rebuke a thought, because if I'm correct, rebuking is more so a correction. You're more so supposed to cast it out. It's supposed to be, completely out of your head. So I had that issue, and I got to the understanding of, all right, I need to pray about it, and I need to get into the word, and I need to fast more. Fasting was also brought up to me recently a lot. You know, a lot of people are telling me to fast. There was multiple videos in my feed that mentioned it randomly. So yeah, it's definitely less apparent, and I do fall still, but I aiming to get to the point where it's not an issue anymore. You know, where I can be like, you know what, I know my identity fully. I know the full consequence of this action, and it's not worth disappointing my God or just hurting him. So yeah, I definitely do try and keep more in mind of how he feels about it too. And again, just relying on his strength and on my strength. One thing God is teaching me right now is that my past doesn't define how he uses me, and my shortcomings as well. So I would see the dirt that I did in the world, and you know, just the negative actions that I did with women, how I used to treat them. You know, I saw them as just objects. Stuff I did in the streets, robbing people, whatnot. Feel me? He I think he used David a lot to kind of bring that realization towards me. Now, David wasn't, you know, just wilding out and sinning. He was a man of repentance. He was after God's own heart, despite his shortcomings, and God used him to be the king. Despite how people saw him, God still raised him up. Now, how that ties back into me is, you know, with the ministry idea and just how God uses me. I usually have this thought in my head, like it's like this quiet thought that says, like, you know, but you did this in the past, so he's not going to do that with you. Or if I see a miracle, or, you know, how strongly God's using somebody, you know, like, oh, you know, you're not going to get to that point. But that's why his word is so important, to go back and see how he sees me, and how, you know, just to remind myself of how long he's, you know, been purifying me. And it's a process. You know, it's not really a destination. Purification is not a destination. It's a process, because we're always being purified. You know, being cleansed, rejuvenated through his word, sanctified. And yeah, he's just been showing me how much he loves me, and how much, you know, he's been wanting to be there for me since the beginning. And as much damage as I did in the world to people, I could do much more healing through him for his people. If somebody was to walk up to me and ask me why they should follow Jesus, I would say that there's nothing to be lost. You know, we all have a coping mechanism that we use to, you know, give us motivation throughout our lives. And it could be a multitude of things. It could be sex, it could be money, it could be drugs. But with the Lord by your side, you're not really losing on anything. If anything, you're only gaining. You don't go through less trials. You're, you know, if anything, you're more protected from the attacks of the enemy. You know, you have a God who loves you. You have a whole book that explains how much he cares about you, and how much he desires a relationship with you, and how much he sacrificed on the cross to get this relationship with you. So there can be communion between us and God. You know, there needs to be a spilling of the blood. And thankfully we had his blood, which is perfect enough for us to have the Holy Spirit dwell in us if we accept him everywhere. You know, there's no separation. There's nothing standing between you and God. It's nothing at all.